In the midst of the women's rights movement, 1887, Nellie Bly, the first female investigative journalist, wrote an article on the conditions of New York's Blackwell's Island Asylum. She quickly became famous from this, not only improving conditions for the patients, but also proving that women are just as powerful and able as men.
Nellie Bly was born Elizabeth Ann Cochran on May 5, 1864, in Cochran's Hill, Pennsylvania. As a young child, Elizabeth's mother refused to listen to the norms placed on clothing and always dressed Elizabeth in bright pink. When Elizabeth was 6, her father passed away and her mother was unable to maintain the house. Elizabeth and her family were forced to move into the city, where her brothers began to look for work. After moving, Elizabeth enrolled in a state school in Indiana, but left after one term due to financial struggles and moved with her mother to Pittsburgh. This was Elizabeth's first time living in a big city, and she was truly introduced to the Progressive era's achievements. In Pittsburgh, Elizabeth began to look for work and soon decided on a job as a reporter, but found that it was extremely difficult to find people that would hire her due to her gender. She then moved to New York, seeking more opportunities. Soon after, Elizabeth saw a newspaper talking about women in the workforce and wrote a letter to them criticizing the sexism.
It argued that the only place a woman belonged was in the home, to be a helpmate to a man. It said they had no value outside of this, and Nellie, along with many other women I assume, was furious.
The newspaper editor saw potential in her and invited her to work as a reporter for the Dispatch. She accepted and changed her name to Nellie Bly, after a female reporter who had failed because she only wrote articles on women. Nellie talked to the editor, Joseph Pulitzer, about writing an article on immigration in the United States, but he refused and instead suggested researching one of New York's insane asylums. Blackwell's Island was a women's insane asylum that was opened in 1839 as an asylum and jail. It was New York's first publicly announced asylum and was used as a tourist attraction for people to come see the mentally ill.
Nellie accepted. Knowing that as one of Blackwell's many guests, she would not be shown how the patients were truly treated, she decided that she would instead fake mental illness and be committed. Being a woman in the 1880s, Nellie knew that achieving this would not be difficult. To begin, she purchased a room in a cheap inn and acted crazy, refusing to sleep and causing a scene. It didn't take long for her to be arrested and diagnosed with dementia, an illness that impairs its victim's memory.
Blackwell's Asylum is on an island off the coast of New York. To get there, Nellie, who had named herself Nellie Brown, was brought to a place called Bellevue, where patients were brought before being properly committed. She learned there that many of the women weren't insane at all, and had been put there because they were recent immigrants who couldn't speak English, or had families or friends who saw the asylum as an easy way to get rid of them. Nellie had met several other patients there.
Anne Neville had been a poor chambermaid but had gotten sick and gone to her sister's home to be treated. Her nephew lost his job and was unable to pay the home expenses and sent her to the asylum because they couldn't care for her. She knew that she was not insane, and the officials did too, but they still locked her away. Louise Schanz was a recent immigrant from Germany who didn't speak English. The officials tried to understand her, but when they were unsuccessful, locked her up despite her inability to plead her sanity.
Tilly Maillard recently recovered from a fever and was suffering from nervous debility. Although she claimed her sanity to the officials, begging them to test her, they still locked her up, saying that they knew all that they needed to know.
During her stay, Nellie had been secretly documenting her experiences. She wrote that the patients were forced to sit on benches, silently, without moving for up to 12 hours a day. The building was never properly warmed, and the patients were given inadequate clothing. The women took ice-cold baths and stayed in wet clothing for hours, which often caused illnesses that the officials never properly treated. The food was flavorless, lacking nutrients, and often moldy or contaminated. Sanitation was horrible, and those who misbehaved or complained were beaten. Some women even reported incidents of sexual harassment. Most shockingly, many of the women weren't insane at all and had only been sent because they were recent immigrants and couldn't speak English or had families who saw the asylum as an easy way to get rid of them.
The insane asylum is a human rat trap. It is easier to get in, but once there, it is impossible to leave. From the moment I entered the insane ward on the island, I made no attempt to keep up the assumed role of insanity. I talked and acted just as I do in ordinary life. Yet strange to say, the more sanely I talked and acted, the crazier I was thought to be.
Once Nellie was transferred to Blackwell's asylum itself, she was placed in a dark room to fight her insanity, despite that being a way to create it. Soon after, she stopped acting insane, but the officials never noticed her very obvious sanity. She stayed in the asylum for 10 days before being removed. In her article, she said that she was terrified that she would not have a way out. After releasing the article, it quickly became one of the most popular articles of the time. People from all over New York realized that the women in the asylum deserved better, and an investigation was launched. Almost instantly, the sanitation and food were improved, and the cruel staff were fired. Nellie became an icon all over the country, and her career officially began.
Other newspaper companies began to write articles on Nellie. A few were criticizing her, but most were praising her talent and bravery. During her time, it was weird for a woman to do something as mundane as going shopping without a male escort. It shocked many that she would do something so dangerous alone.
Nellie's career didn't end there. Her next article was about her journey of traveling around the whole world in 72 days. She traveled alone and beat the record placed before her by a man. She also went to the front lines of World War II to interview the soldiers in the trenches and get their conditions and funding improved. She even published a 96-page book about her stay at Blackwell's Asylum called 10 Days in a Madhouse that was eventually turned into a movie. Every new article she wrote inspired more women to challenge the current gender inequality and proved that anyone can succeed.
She changed the face of journalism forever in a time when many people thought she shouldn't even be able to write, let alone have such a huge voice. She was the epitome of someone who refused to give up, who refused to be silenced. She had a lot of things to say, and you were going to listen.
Because of Nellie Bly's hard work, dedication, and how much she inspired women and young girls around the world, she became a frontier in women's history. Nellie Bly was the first woman to do such a dangerous investigative report. She proved to the country that women can do just as well as men, even with the odds not in their favor in a mainly male-dominated field. Nellie Bly was the first woman that girls could look up to instead of feeling that they were less than human. They could be just like Nellie Bly and make a lasting impact. After all of the work Nellie Bly had done, others were inspired to continue the women's rights movement and pass the 19th Amendment, a law that allowed women to vote.